Well, welcome to another wine conversation. It's David Baer here, and today I'm actually talking to another David, David Speer, who is a certified sommelier, the owner of this fabulous champagne bar here in Portland, Oregon called Ambonnet. And when he isn't busy with that, he also runs wine classes. He's I don't know what you would call it, a concierge sommelier, helping private clients with their wine cellars and wine collections. He's been featured in publications all over North America: USA Today, Food and Wine, Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast, and the list goes on and on. I don't even have time to mention them all because we wouldn't be able to chat. David has been, in fact, in Food and Wine magazine, chosen as one of the 10 sommeliers of the year back in 2013, and his restaurant, or his wine bar, Ambonnet, has been featured as one of the top 100 wine restaurants in America by Wine Enthusiast. And he has even more exciting projects that we're going to learn about today. And I'm so happy that all of that has brought us together for a chance to chat with each other. So, David,
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you.
Well, so you are sitting right now in Ambonnet. I can't tell. Is it Ambonnet or is it across the
Sitting
hall?
in Red Slate.
Okay,
Yep.
in Red Slate. So you have this dual business at the moment. In a very cool industrial location in Portland, which is not unusual for a city like this. But your focus these days, and has been for a while now, is running a champagne bar. So
Uh,
let's talk about champagne bars in general and how that came about for you.
yeah. I mean, for me, I think in Portland we're exceptionally lucky to have a lot of small distributors and importers that bring in all sorts of amazing champagne and have for a long time. And I've gotten to know them and work with them over the years. And so I when I was looking at expanding my business, a great little spot down the hall from my current business, Red Slate, opened up, and it was this tiny little room that holds 20 people now, and it became Ambonnet. Um, and so I was very excited and just thought I'd make it a wine bar because a lot of people wanted that. Initially, when I was running just my first business, and the more I looked at it and the neighborhood and the economy back in 2011, I was like, this probably just a wine bar is not going to fly. And I don't have a big residential community around me either. So I knew it had to be kind of a destination. And I decided to go with one of my loves, and that's champagne, and just open a bar focusing on champagne and sparkling, and making it exclusively based on those. So I don't have any red wine or white wine, beer, cocktails. I don't do anything but champagne and just a touch of sparkling these days. So I'd say it's 99% champagne what I sell. So
And clearly that formula has worked for you,
yeah,
because you're certainly getting the accolades and the attention from the clientele, and so congratulations for all of that. But clearly this didn't all start with Ambonnet. So I want to go back a little bit further into what brought you to all of this in the first place. And if I remember correctly, you're from St. Louis or St. Louis area.
yeah.
Something brought you out to Portland, Oregon at some point, and I think, if I remember, it was culinary school. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Yeah, I came out here in 2002 after graduating from college and kind of bouncing around the country, working various jobs to go to culinary school.
Hmm.
And I graduated in 2003, and I cooked for a couple of years, mostly in dessert and pastry, and enjoyed all of it, but realized it wasn't quite right either. And so that's when I started toying with the idea of going into wine, which my parents raised me in a wine household. They were really into wine as connoisseurs and collectors. And so I decided to take the plunge and go through the International Sommelier Guild, their whole program, and become a certified sommelier back in, I guess I graduated in 2004 from that program.
So,
Yeah.
that's now 10 years that you have been a certified sommelier. Can
Uh-huh.
you, for the benefit of our audience, sort of walk us through, just in general? I mean, we know that a sommelier is somebody who provides the wine service at a restaurant. But what is certification for a sommelier? What is that all about?
Well, certification, and in 2010, I also became certified with the Quartermaster sommeliers as well. So I've got the dual certification. Um, Essentially, in both programs, there was a rather difficult test that was broken into a written component that had multiple choice as well as essay, followed by a service component where it was role playing your job in a restaurant with a team of judges or master sommeliers and kind of talking about your service technique, because that is a big part of being a sommelier, is being on the floor and how you interact with guests and the restaurant as a whole and preparing food. And then the final piece is a blind tasting component that varies depending on which program you're with, but yeah, you have to, you're given these wines and you have to tell the judges all about what's going on flavor and aroma wise, as well as where you think it's from regionally and cool climate, warm climate, on and on, all the way down to the place and the grape and the vintage and so on and so forth.
So now you've been through 2 certifications and you've been through similar programs where you've had to go through this testing. What do you do to prepare for blind taste testings? I mean, clearly there's a lot of palate development and training, I guess, just like in any other field. What do you do?
I think in general, one of the things I do that wasn't specifically for the test, but something that made me a better wine professional and just a better wine consumer, was I really worked to actively build a smell library. I often think that smell and taste are very underrated senses in our society, and as a result, we don't actually remember what we smell and taste very actively. And so, if I tell you to picture the color mauve, you can do it. If I tell you to imagine a fire engine siren, you can do it. But if I tell you to tell me what cardamom smells like, that might throw you for a loop. And so by actively going through and smelling and tasting everything I could, and just, kind of creating a little marker in my brain for, hey, this is what the smell actually is, and then taking that and applying it into wine or anything else I'm enjoying, beer, spirits, you name it, that really helped a lot. And I think it's something that anyone can do pretty easily. So that was a big part. And then more specifically for the tests, I really tasted a lot of wine, and I tasted it blind, but after a while you start to get to know great profiles, and there's certain ones that have certain markers or tells that make them more apparent, and then you really start lining up wines that are easily confused. Oftentimes things like Rioja and Barbaresco can fall into that category. And so, kind of going through and getting to know all these grapes and wines very intimately.
Well, that's fascinating. Knowing that Rioja or Barbaresco can get confused with each other or with other things out there.
More with each other. When it doesn't sound like that you could confuse them, but oftentimes there's an oak treatment,
right.
There's an age to them, and if you're so much of blind tasting in an exam setting is not psyching yourself out and being aware and kind of not just avoiding the confusion in your brain. And so I've watched a lot of professional tasters, master sommeliers, you name it, who have talked themselves into something that as an observer, knowing the wines, you're like, oh, that's totally wrong. It's almost like watching a horror movie. It's like, no, don't go in that door. It's wrong. But it happens a lot. Because you're so focused and so in the moment and really trying to pull a wine apart that you miss a very obvious indicator that can then be misinterpreted. Or you look at the other factors in the wine that kind of take you in the wrong direction.
Well, there's a clear amount of skill here, just like there's skill in sport, just like there's skill in being a professional crossword puzzle, solver. That is technical, but as you said, anybody who wants to, focus on developing these particular skills can.
Right.
That's great. That's great, and you should be commended for investing the time and energy in doing it, because it's not necessarily easy. But so you've now been through your first certification,
right.
And then you jump from the world of food,
right,
to some form of employment or business in wine. What was that?
So the first job I got in wine was working for New Seasons Market, which is an upscale grocery store here in Portland, or grocery store chain rather.
Hmm.
That it's kind of like a local Whole Foods, if you will.
Okay.
And this is when it was a much smaller organization than it is today, and so the it was a very dynamic store and a great place to work as somebody who was just getting into the wine business, because we sold a huge volume of wine, and so I really got to know a lot about different producers, different regions, and kind of apply everything I had in this sommelier setting into very active work on the floor. And because I only worked in the wine department, or the wine and beer department, I would just sell wine all day long, and in a very quick, rapid way, because there were constantly people coming into the wine aisle and wanting to know about stuff, but didn't have all day to talk about it, and didn't necessarily want to get really technical or nerdy. It was just kind of like, hey, I want something delicious. We're going to have spaghetti tonight, or whatever it was, and so that's what was going on. And so it was a lot of fun to kind of take all of my culinary knowledge of cooking and food, and then kind of working in this grocery setting where I was like, oh yeah, it wasn't tied to a specific restaurant menu, so I would constantly get everyone's menu of what they were making at home, and kind of how to pair and work with it.
And I think in a setting like that, you have the great benefit of not having the intimidation factor that people can have going into a fancy wine shop,
Sure.
because people are out for their casual weekend shopping, or just grabbing dinner for the night, and a grocery chain like New Seasons has some pretty upscale and interesting options for those who want to partake, and I bet you got to play around with a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, particularly back when I was working there from like 2004 through 2005 or six. The economy was really strong, and so I was able to sell a lot of wine. At one point, I was out at a location where there was a lot of corporate money around, and so it was not so much, hey, I want something that's like $10, $15. It was like, nope, we're going to have cases of $50 wines, and so all of a sudden it was a lot of fun to have both those environments to work in.
Not to suggest that there isn't really really delicious wine at $10 or $15.
Of course,
Right.
there is.
Yeah. All right, so you wrapped up your tenure at in the grocery world, and then you went on to do something really kind of interesting. Can you tell us about this segue that you went into this sort of new direction?
So essentially, when I was at New Seasons, I developed a lot of great relationships with some of my clients, but I couldn't track what they were buying from me, and so I have trouble remembering what they bought 2 months ago, and they're like, oh, I really loved it, and this and that, but I couldn't remember. And so essentially, I started a business to do just that. And keep in mind, this was back in 2005, when the idea of private wine buying and things like that were not very widespread. If you were in New York or something, sure, you could find that kind of service, but certainly not in Portland. And so I went out on my own and formed a business, and essentially started to act as a private sommelier for my clients, and doing both buying as well as consulting on their cellars on kind of when to drink their wines. If they needed appraisals, I would do all those kind of things. So I was really kind of a full service shop. And ultimately, as I grew the business, more and more people wanted me to do wine classes and tastings and fun things like that. And so for a while, I do it in their homes, but then I grew out of that model and I was renting spaces here and there to host classes, and ultimately I found my own space. And after 3 years of doing it, I opened Red Slate, which was kind of the space to do all of this fun stuff that I was doing in people's homes or offices, and then creating a space to do it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then, if I remember correctly, Red Slate also morphed into sort of doubling as a weekend or end of the week wine bar or something like that for a little while.
For a little while, yeah. It was on Friday nights. It would be open as a wine bar, and lots of my guests were really excited about that because they could come in and enjoy fun wines with me. And ultimately, what I discovered, though, it just didn't. Being open one night as a wine bar didn't economically work, because I'd have to open all these wines, and then I didn't have the next day to continue to sell them and things like that. And so I stopped that practice, but always kept it in the back of my head, and that was actually ultimately what inspired Ambonnet was the original Friday night wine bar that a lot of my guests still wanted me to have. But how I set Red Slate up wasn't great for a full-time wine bar, so I had to do it in a different location. And so with the second location, I designed it in a way that was more conducive to being open all the time as a wine bar rather than an event and tasting space.
Yeah. And you're talking about some real business considerations that we all have to have in our businesses, and issues like spoilage or the wine just not being able to be reused after a bottle gets open. That's something that a lot of people don't even think about, but it's a real important factor in a business like yours.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's a huge factor.
So opportunity knocked. You had a space basically across the hall from where you are with Red Slate, and you open up Ambonnet, and as we've already talked about, you've gotten lots and lots of great attention nationally, and locally. You're hopping. You got a great following of clients, and can you talk a little bit about sort of the types of clients who who come and visit a champagne bar, and what
Sure.
type of experience one should expect?
Well, with my champagne bar, I find it's different than actually every other champagne bar across the country I've been to. And at the other champagne bars, there's a lot of kind of luxury and focus on the party and the scene, and there's lots of see and be seen and trying to meet people romantically and all those kinds of things. And I applaud them for that. It's not what I like to hang out in or go to, and so I didn't want my bar to be like that. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, where there was so many great importers and distributors here in Portland, there were so many great champagnes that I really wanted to have a champagne bar that was more focused on the wine rather than the idea of the wine. And so, at Ambonnet, when you come in, I have a range of guests, and some of them are people who are very new to champagne, but are having a big celebration in their life. They graduated, they got a new job, they are getting married, whatever it is, and so they want to come celebrate with champagne. And so they're lots of fun, and I always have some great champagnes that are very approachable and friendly for anyone that comes in. And then after that, I have a definite segment of guests that are really into wine, but don't necessarily know a lot about champagne, and so they're using my bar as an opportunity to learn about it and enjoy it and kind of see what's going on in that real wine sense of champagne. And then the other component are champagne lovers and people who are just really into it. And some of them are local, but I get a lot who are in from all over the world because what I do is very unique. And having all these cool champagnes available and having them at reasonable prices has definitely brought in a lot of people who are just very enthusiastic and knowledgeable about champagne, so they're tons of fun to talk to.
Yep. Well, it sounds like all three of those audiences can be a lot of fun to talk to, because you get people who are curious but casually curious. You get people who are really looking for great education, and you have a background as an educator. And then you have people who just like to geek out with the stuff, and clearly you like to geek out with the stuff yourself. So, how much fun is that?
Tons of fun. I mean, it's really great having my bar and working there all the time, because everyone who comes in wants to be happy. Even if they had a hard day at work, after a glass of champagne, they're going to be happy. I never have the kind of downer people that, I just broke up with my girlfriend, or this bad thing happened and I've got to come drown my sorrows at the bar.
Right.
Nobody comes to my bar for that. Mm-hmm. Everyone who comes wants to be there, and they're excited and they're happy. And so it's always a really great place to be. And sometimes it's very boisterous and joyful in a noisy way, and then other times it's just kind of calm and relaxed. And so you never know quite what you're walking into as far as who's going to be there on any given night. But it's always a good atmosphere to be in.
Yep. And I really like how you've made the decision about the type of environment you want to have. I mean, you don't have, loud thumping club music in a dark setting. You have, a lighter, brighter space for people
Mhm.
to really, interact and spend time with each other, which sounds like great quality time. And that
Right.
clearly was a conscious decision on your part.
Yeah, and that's really what I wanted. I don't like hanging out in those kind of bars, as I said, and so I really wanted to make a space where people could come in and enjoy themselves and feel relaxed and learn if they want, but that's not a necessity. But yeah, just to kind of really enjoy wine and your friends and the people around you, rather than trying to make it about something fancy or trying to impress people.
Yeah. So here's a question related to the two of the types of customers you talked about. For my viewers, you may know that I have a course on wine confidence,
Uh-huh.
which is all about feeling comfortable and not intimidated by wine.
Right.
Champagne is one of those things that people can be awfully intimidated by,
Sure.
and really not know much about. So I'm sure you get a good bit of that.
Hmm.
How do you help somebody through the process of just being comfortable and familiar with, this very specific area, which
Sure.
can be awfully complex and overwhelming to people?
Yeah. For me, it's certainly champagne is an area that even master sommeliers don't necessarily know tons about. So I have everyone from the very basic beginner all the way up to people who know significant amounts about wine in general, but they don't know a whole lot about champagne. And everyone kind of knows they like it, but they don't necessarily know much more than that. Maybe they know some of the regions or the grapes or a few producers, but they're not very confident. And champagne's really hard because it's even the inexpensive champagnes are expensive. I mean, you're looking at 40 or $50 right off the bat to get into champagne,
Yeah.
and then the price just goes up. And so we don't get a chance to taste a lot of champagnes and really evaluate them the way that we can with wines that are $10 a bottle. It's like, okay, I can really get into this without a big investment. So I've really had to learn to make everyone feel comfortable very quickly, and a lot of that. Fortunately, champagne just by its nature does a lot of that heavy lifting for me because it's champagne, and everyone already has an idea about what champagne should be, even if they don't know much about it. The Champenois have done such a great job of branding for parties and celebrations and good times and everything that part of it's very helpful. So there's a lot of people that they're coming in and they're already excited to be there, but they just don't know a lot, and so then it's my job to really learn about where my table's at very quickly and what they're comfortable with. And if it's, hey, I've never had champagne before, which we've had a lot of people come in like that, I'm really excited that they're coming to me to have their first experience. And so I do, if they want to have a discussion and really learn more about the process and how it's made or where it's at in the grapes, I'm happy to break all that down. And if they just want to kind of know which one I think they'll like, that's great too. And so for me, a lot of it isn't so much a step-by-step, I talk with everyone about the exact same things. It's more where are these guests at and what do they want to talk about and hear about. And sometimes they don't want to talk about any of it. They're just like, I want something delicious in my glass, and then I want to hang out with my friends. And I think that's wonderful. I have no need or desire to preach to people and to make them learn things that I've certainly gotten at other wine bars and other wine establishments over the years, where it's like, no, you're here because of the wine, and you have to focus and be present. It's like, no way. If you want to just have fun and relax, do it. That's in my mind the primary purpose of wine is for enjoyment and spending time with your friends and people you enjoy. So that's just that. And if you want to learn more or really geek out, then I have all of that information at my fingertips, and I'm happy to share lots of it. So, yeah.
So for somebody who is not very familiar with champagne at all, You know, they're aware that there are lots of these big brands that we see advertised in you know, national wine publications, and they, you know, they go into their shop and they'll see, you know, some of the big names.
Right.
There's a whole world beyond that. Can you sort of break down just a couple of statistics for us on sort of what the world of champagne is about? Because it's not about, you know, simply the big name brands out there, but
Right.
there are other types of champagne. Can you just give us a quick primer on
Right.
all of that?
The quick and the dirty on it. You know, they're roughly 2 or 3 dozen major producers. The ones you're talking about, the well knowns. You can walk into most stores and see at least a half a dozen of them on the shelf
Yeah.
at any given time. And those guys are great and exciting because what they're doing is they're growing their own fruit as well as purchasing fruit from all over Champagne, and creating a blend, which is an exceptionally hard thing to do. To create a wine from grapes and wines from all over a big region and have it be tasty and consistent every year. And so I really applaud them for that. On the other end of the spectrum, there are a lot of small little producers that literally they have a vineyard of their own, and they do all the work themselves in the vineyard, and then harvest time comes and they pick all the grapes, bring them into the winery, and do all the winery work and actually making the wine, the fermentations, and then putting it through the traditional method of champagne making, where there's adding the yeast to the bottle and the secondary fermentation and so on. And so a lot of people are really excited about these little producers right now because it gives you an opportunity to kind of see behind the curtain and get to taste what these various vineyards and terroirs of Champagne really offer. Whereas the larger producers are great for kind of creating a consistent, delicious wine. The smaller guys are great because they show you just one area. They show you their backyard in Champagne. And so as you kind of get to know more of the little guys, you get to see what each of these areas brings to a lot of the blends that the big guys are making. And so I think it's fun to see both ends of the spectrum. There's a lot of people, a lot of wine professionals that like to talk trash on the bigger houses and only praise the little guys. And I think that's a little blindsided, or a little lacking, because there are some amazing wines from the more well-known producers.
So
As well
Champagne,
as the guys.
yep,
Yeah.
this is true. Champagne itself is not a very big area geographically. Um,
It is.
well, I guess in the scheme of things, it's not the, you know, the country of France is the size of Texas, right?
Right. Yep.
So then when you look at all of the different wine that's produced in various areas, yes, it is probably one of the largest producing areas. That said, it's not a lot of, you know, it's not the size of a state, but there's a ton of wine that's coming out of there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so I guess
Well,
you
and
were
I
asking.
guess as Champagne has expanded, or will have officially expanded by
It
almost
has,
twice or something, if I remember correctly.
yeah, and I mean, kind of, if you look at it at its widest point to drive east to west in Champagne, you're going to sit in the car for an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay, it's
If you
larger
go-
than I thought then.
Yeah, and if you go north to south, it's every bit of 3 hours.
Okay.
So it's a pretty big region, but not all of that region, not all of that area is under grapes.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you're driving through wheat fields or whatever else to get to the next set of hills where there are more grapes. And so, yeah, it's big, and it's a huge landmass, but where they're actually growing grapes isn't as big.
Mhm.
And you know, overall in Champagne, to kind of put in perspective, there are roughly, I don't know, the last time I heard the number, I want to say it's about 26,000 different farmers growing grapes. The majority of that are sold to the large producers, but of that big number, about 1,900 of them are making their own champagnes as well.
Wow.
So, you know, we hear about grower champagnes and how rare they are and interesting and this and that. And here in the States, kind of across all of America, I've heard there are roughly 250 to 300 different small producers being imported.
Mhm.
which is still just a fraction
Yeah.
of the broader number of 1900s. So there's still a lot of producers that haven't come to the States, and honestly, I think that's probably a good thing. A lot of those 1900 are making perfectly fine wine, but I don't think it's interesting enough that it needs to make the journey over here
Yep.
to to reach our mouths. So yeah.
So you have maybe about 250 producers represented, and maybe they're each making 3 or 4 or 5 different bottlings on average. Who knows?
Yeah.
Some are just making one.
Mm-hmm.
Where does somebody go to find this kind of stuff? And I ask you specifically because I hear a rumor that Ambonnet is going to be looking at some new directions, and so perhaps you can share with our audience about some of the things that you're playing with.
Yeah. So one of the big project that you're referring to right now that's going to start early in 2015. I'm going to launch Ambonnet Cellar, and so it will be mostly online, but I will have a small brick and mortar location as well. Because I've really found that a lot of my guests that are tourists and come to Portland, or a lot of people that hear about me or have read about me in one of these publications, they get really excited because it is hard to find all of these various growers, even if you're in a major city. I mean, I was just back in Chicago, and I was surprised by the lack of grower champagnes in the third largest city in America. They were still hard to find. And so, because we get such a great variety here in Portland, I thought it would be outstanding to open a retail store online where everyone who's excited about champagne can come. We're still working on the final numbers, but it does look like we're going to be the largest, have the largest champagne selection in America. Have somewhere between 300 and 500 different selections at any given time. So this is a pretty substantial amount of champagne. So I'm really excited about it and getting to share everything that I love on a much broader scale. That if you can't come to Ambonnet on a given night, or if it's a long plane ride for you to get here, then yeah, I can still ship you some fun champagne, and you can enjoy the process that way in the experience.
Well, that's terrific. That sounds like a very exciting project. I'm looking forward to seeing how that all pans out, and then we'll have to invite you back on the show to learn more about what the developments are and how people can connect with you through the new project as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that'd be.
Hey, David Speer, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me today and sharing your story and your interest and excitement in the world of champagne and wine in general with our audience. Any last words of advice for a new a budding champagne explorer out there?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice with champagne is just drink it. As with so many expensive wines, we kind of wait for this special moment or great night or whatever it's going to be. And champagne and all these great wines, oftentimes they're better when you're just kind of hanging out with one or two people you really enjoy. And that is the celebration that night. You're just simply pulling the cork on a cool bottle rather than waiting for a birthday or a celebration. And so the more often you drink champagne, the happier you will be. I can guarantee that. And the more you'll want to drink champagne. So it's a nice wheel that spins into itself. But yeah, just drink more champagne. And the other one, stop using flutes. Use white wine glasses or red wine glasses. Put the champagne in something where it can really open up, because the flutes, while good for the bubbles, are horrible for the nose. So get it in a bigger glass so you can really smell what's going on. I mean, you spent enough money on the bottle. You should really get more out of it than just it's fizzy.
Yeah.
If you want that, have some Prosecco. So.
Well, those are two great pieces of advice, and I agree with you. I think people should drink more champagne, and they should experience it more fully, and those are two great ways to be able to do it. So, David Speer, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and look forward to seeing you again in person, hopefully not before too long.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks a bunch, David.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.